All right, what's this? What are you doing here? We had a table.
So,
Love it. So this is just a hot spot. I've got another one. You need to grab any color.
thank you. I am not muted. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm here. So.
I am.
See if she's hot.
Anybody out there?
There we go. Now that's not acting as a speaker anymore. You should just be acting as a mic.
Check, check.
Hear it.
I think we need to find. We need to- this- into the one that applies.
No, this one would be really. This one would be really.
Testing, testing for live streaming purposes. I'm hoping people can hear me. It sounds okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to do the same thing.
Don't do that. So, you got her? And when the first quiet.
I mean, the guys will- You'll be able to hear. It'll still be a little bit background noise, but
I mean, there's, it's like.
it won't be as Taylor being divided.
Diane usually is.
Oh, good, good.
I'm gonna grab some. Can I get you a drink? Anybody need water or anything?
No, thanks, Troy. I appreciate that.
No, this is.
That's hard. It is.
Yeah.
Safety. And I'm gonna do this to give you a moment of attention. Show you at the curriculum, and I'm here for help. Oh, and my cell phone is in there. And when you move on it, you can do it, I can come to you, just if you need anything. So. Thank you. Sincerely appreciate that.
I'm only here to talk.
Talk to your husband about you. Right. And so I guess I need to try this on our priority active. No, no, outside of this, but basically it's.
It's collaborative storytelling, and if you remember that, you're doing.
You canceled the 3:30 today?
We stay 30.
Today's 3:30.
And we're not having it.
What?
Is it still on there?
No, I got a notification that it got canceled.
Yeah, because when we went in and met yesterday, Shane.
I need to talk to Shane and Lauren. I need to, because I was planning
Yeah.
releasing the crack.
So we just, I don't think he's gonna come, he's not gonna come in. You said what?
She has a chair next to her. I'll move my backpack. Yeah, just got muted. I'm sorry. We could.
Right there.
You need a cookie?
Oh, yeah.
These little turnout. The live stream may be paused. I'm not for sure, so.
Yeah.
Can't be the bad.
lunch and is enjoying that. And as you do, I want to introduce you all to what we're all here for. So my name is David Witherow. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Air Quality at the Division of Environmental Quality. And before we get started, I want to say some thank yous and some welcomes. So welcome to everyone participating today, to all of you that stayed on after the RDOT conference. Welcome. And to everyone that came just for us, special welcome. And we appreciate you all being here very much. And to everyone listening and watching online, also welcome. Special thanks to RDOT for letting us piggyback on your conference. We really appreciate that. Another thanks goes out to MetroPlan, Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission, and the City of Fort Smith, and my dedicated staff at E&E for putting this all together. Believe me, this would not be possible without their collaboration. So a little bit about the Energy and Environment Innovation Plan we're all here to discuss. So welcome again to our first workshop to talk about this plan. Essentially, this is our attempt to make Arkansas as competitive as possible for some infrastructure funding that's come available from the federal government. So how much funding are we talking about? Well, not for Arkansas, but the pot for the country is about $4.6 billion. So it's a ton of money. So we're very excited about it. We've done a lot of work to try to get everything prepared so we can bring all of you together to talk about ideas and ways to move these projects forward. Essentially, what our deliverable is to you all at the end of the day is to have a portfolio of model plans that can be easily taken and adapted to your specific projects and then submitted to the EPA to be competitive for this funding. So that's what we're all here to talk about. Now, the catch-22, you might be saying, oh, great money. And, there's only one real stipulation to this is it has to decrease greenhouse gases. So beyond that, what's the catch-22? Well, the catch is the timeline. We're working on a very, very short timeline here. Our plan is due to the EPA March of next year, and all the applications for consideration are to be submitted by April of next year. So we're running full sprint all the way to that time. So that's why we've asked you all to come in, and we want to pick your brains. We want to see what is important to you all, what kind of projects make sense to your stakeholders and yourselves and the community. So that's why we're here. We want to enable access and enhance Arkansas's competitiveness for funding. We want to support investment in technologies and practices that reduce pollutant emissions, create high quality jobs. That's super important, and spur economic growth in the state. So we think we've got a real opportunity here to invest in Arkansas. And some of our priorities include reducing emissions while reducing costs, improving safety, and connecting communities. We've invited experts to speak to y'all today to kind of get the creative juices flowing and to get the ideas out there and to answer questions. So some of our experts are going to talk about low and zero emission vehicles and infrastructure, including electric batteries and charging, fuel cells and hydrogen fueling stations, designing transportation system to ensure safety, convenient access to multiple modes of mobility and sustainability, managing the flow of traffic to reduce travel times and emissions. I'll tell you, managing the flow of traffic is a big deal in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and emissions from what we call mobile sources, so vehicles. And I wouldn't have believed it until I saw the math. I mean, it's pretty significant. So with all these new investments in technologies and infrastructure, we're also want to focus on workforce and equitable access considerations for technologies and practices, because the workforce can have to shift, right? When you talk about moving from fossil fuels to green energy, we're already seeing that somewhat. So that's one of the things that this federal money can go towards as well. So there are a lot of tie-in opportunities here that are and can meet some of the governor's goals for the state. And those goals include facilitating statewide economic growth and competitiveness. That's a big one. Keeping communities safe. You all have heard about that on the news, I'm sure. Preparing the infrastructure and workforce for these green energy jobs. Preservation and promotion of the natural state. That's one that should be important to all of us. So what we hope is that this workshop will be an incubator of ideas that will produce model programs, like I've said, and projects for our energy and environment innovation plan that will maximize reach of these federal dollars allocated under this plan. That will ensure good stewardship of Arkansas and the country's tax dollars, will improve the quality of life for Arkansans, and expand access and connectivity across the state and drive impact for all Arkansans, including rural, low-income, and disadvantaged communities. So I want to thank everyone again for being here and participating. And my staff is over here, Metro Plan and Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission and Fort Smith are spread out all over the room. So please, if you see one of us and have a question, do not hesitate to ask. These guys are all experts in their fields and they're very good at what they do. And they are here to help you guys, help us do a good job with this plan, and enable access to these funds for Arkansas. So thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trisha Treese. I'm with the Arkansas Department of Energy and Environment. I'm the Deputy Associate Director for the Office of Air Quality. I have on stage with me Joshua Robertson, from City of Fort Smith, Bernadette Rhodes from Metro Plan, and Elizabeth Bowen from Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission. So we're going to start this out by providing a little bit of an overview of exactly what the planning process is that we're doing. And then we'll have our partners have the opportunity to speak and let you guys know a little bit about their specific role in this process. And then we'll get to some logistics for our expert panelists that we're so excited to have with us, as well as some engagement, some structured engagement we're going to try to do, and some breakouts later in the workshop. So what is the Energy and Environment Innovation Plan? So as David said, this is our plan for different kinds of measures, incentive programs, and that sort of thing that state and local government agencies could run to improve sustainable infrastructure in Arkansas. And specifically, we gather all of you guys here to help us with the transportation piece. So we have 3 deliverables under EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So the first one, as David mentioned, is a plan due March 1st that will basically lay out a suite of model program design that state and local agencies can pick and choose from and submit applications to EPA for implementation dollars. 2 years from now, we will have a comprehensive plan due. That plan itself doesn't have any money tied to it. However, it is a way of structuring and organizing other federal or other sources of federal funding. There are a lot of DOE and EPA grants out there, and trying to make sure that things fit in a cohesive way to advance Arkansas's priorities with respect to energy and environmental infrastructure. And then lastly, in about 4 years from now, we'll have a status update. And that's really going to be more of a look back on what have we achieved. So what programs have we gotten off the ground? What emission reductions have we gotten? What kind of new workforce training programs have gotten off the ground? What are the emission benefits? What are the job benefits, and so forth? And if we were to continue this planning process, what our future needs would be in order to do that. So as I mentioned before, this Energy and Environment Innovation Planning effort is funded by EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So EPA awarded $250 million across all the states and several municipalities and the tribes for basically crafting these plans. And so the reason that we have these wonderful, fabulous partners, or the reasons that we thought about reaching out to them, is because they also submitted notices of intent to participate in this program, but didn't meet the population cutoff. And we were like, perfect. We have some wonderful partners who really want to do this work, who can help us with capacity on that, and also advance their own regional priorities. So there's a lot of win-wins for there, and I'm very happy. I can't say enough good things about these people. So all of this stuff for the priority implementation plan or priority action plan that's due March 1st is to set state and local government agencies up to apply for implementation dollars. These will range from $2 million to $500 million each, and these are competitive. So one of the major things that we're trying to do in this plan, in addition to creating application-ready model programs, is trying to look at what are the priorities, what are the competition criteria for these, and making sure we're setting these up and doing analyses and all the back work so that these can be very competitive applications and hopefully reduce the burden on state and local government agencies who want to go after this funding. So the implementation guidance from EPA was released yesterday. I did a very quick read, so I'm not an expert in this yet. But what we learned is that they anticipate awarding these, so applications will be due in April. They're anticipating that the money will be out the door by October, and that all of the money will need to be spent within 5 years. So as you're thinking about, what is a model incentive program, for my state or local agency, what is a pass-through grant, what is a rebate, what does that look like? Be thinking about this program needs to run for no more than 5 years. So eligible entities. So these are going to be state and local government entities. So state agencies, local government, so cities, counties, coalitions of cities and counties, metropolitan planning organizations, councils of government, and so forth, tribal governments, and coalitions. So one of the things looking at the amount of awards that they plan to issue under this grant, or under the implementation grants, they're looking at 40 to 110. If we think about all of the recipients and all of the cities and counties and states that are covered under these plans, that 110 isn't very much. And so one of the things, that would be good to be thinking about, as you're thinking about, oh, I want to do this project and I want to do this project, thinking about a broad framework of how would I incentivize this? How would I administer a program that incentivizes this, and finding partners. So building a coalition across a wide area so that we can make sure that the money is coming to our areas rather than, everybody submits their own grant, which you're welcome to do, but, diluting the amount of money that comes to our state. So I refer to this as my giant chicken slide. If you were here the other day, apologies, it's a little bit repetitive on this part. But when we're looking at greenhouse gases in Arkansas, our inventory, the largest contributor to greenhouse gases is the electricity sector, but second is transportation. And so that means that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation in this space. So again, very excited to workshop transportation innovation ideas with you today. So we've kind of, at least MetroPlan has taken the lead on a community survey, which hopefully you guys will also respond to. We have push cards and with access to those. But we've kind of tried to separate out different potential opportunities into buckets. So we have low and zero emission energy. So things like renewables, battery storage, other kinds of storage, hydrogen, nuclear. And then beneficial electrification. So this is really where we're thinking about things like not only energy efficiency, but also electric vehicles and how those fit in. Efficiency and waste minimization. So when we're talking about strategies to minimize vehicle miles traveled, that's an efficiency measure. And then sequestration. So how do we make it so that plants and the soils can absorb more carbon out of the air? things like creating really nice streets with trees and you know, your complete green streets idea. So all of these things really fit into these buckets. So our plan is to take ideas from you guys and other experts in the community and just anybody who wants to send us an idea. We're really excited to hear from you, and do a lot of kind of back end analysis so that we can include this in our plan and make your applications that you ultimately want to pursue competitive. So we're going to look at what are the other federal opportunities for funding for this. Is something under our energy and environment innovation plan, can it be complementary? Can it fill gaps? Can it expand things where there may be an existing program, but there's not enough funding to fund all the projects that you guys want to do, or completely brand new things. Looking at the authority to implement those measures, do we have, you know, or whoever is going to go apply for that grant, do they have the legal authority to administer that grant? Are there potential barriers that we need to be thinking about in terms of deployment of these innovative technologies that maybe we can help advance and work around through this funding? Thinking about community benefits, you know, one of the things that we mentioned before is really emphasizing that all Arkansans are benefiting from this. So we want to make sure that the benefits accrue to all Arkansans, including low income, underserved, rural communities. We don't want these just to be focused in just pockets. We want to try to maximize our reach across the state. And so those are really good things to be thinking about as you're thinking about ideas. You know, how can I ensure equitable access to jobs created because of this, or improved air quality because of this, and so forth. We're going to be doing some inventories and projections on, okay, if we were to implement this entire suite of measures that we're including in our plan, what are the emission reductions that we're going to get? So where are we now? Where do we think we're going to be in the near term? Where do we think we're going to be in the long term? And then I already mentioned air quality benefits. And then what are the workforce needs to deploy some of these innovative technology solutions? Do we have existing training? Do we need to create new training programs? How do we ensure equitable access to those training programs so that all Arkansans can benefit from this? So I'm not going to go into these because David already went, but these were Arkansas's investment priorities for infrastructure. This came out of a workshop that was a whole of state government workshop. And really, when we think about innovative transportation solutions, they really hit most of these, if not all of these, each and every one. And so this is a wonderful time to advance Arkansas's priorities and invest in the state. Again, David mentioned these before, but transportation, we're improving connectivity. We're trying to be responsible with fiscal dollars. Some of these measures will not only reduce emissions, they can also reduce energy bills, improve energy security, reduce costs of maintaining a vehicle. So there's just, as David would say, and I'm going to use this term that he coined, I'm going to call it a win-tet. It's a lot of really great opportunities, a lot of wins for the state. So as David mentioned, we are on an incredibly tight timeline. So we got our grant beginning of July, and we essentially have to be done with this really big portion of it, the priority action plan. It's going to have to be a lot more comprehensive than EPA sold it to us as, so that we can go after those $4.6 billion in competitive dollars, because those are all tied to this priority plan, this first deliverable March 1st. So we are sprinting. Right now we're in the outreach phase. So this is part of it, where we're reaching out to everyone across the state and experts and just trying to pick your brains for ideas and what are some best solutions, what are some best practices, you know, what should we be including and thinking about as we put this plan together. This fall, we'll do the actual writing, we'll do some analysis. We're working on procuring some modeling so that we can actually quantify that or at least 40% of the benefits are going to low-income and disadvantaged communities, because Justice 40 will be a requirement of the implementation grant from EPA. And then we're hoping to provide a feedback period, in case, you didn't get your idea before, and then you see we've written something out and you're like, oh, it would be better if you did this way, or have you thought about that? We're going to try to provide an opportunity for feedback prior to submitting this plan to EPA, and then everybody go forth and apply. So do I want to go into the logistics? These slides, yes, we can make them available. So the last thing I wanted to touch on before I turn it over to my partners to talk about their roles here and then logistics for each of the panels is we have a community survey that kind of broadly goes over a suite of potential measures. And then we also have a idea box, and that's a lot more open. If you have a specific idea that you want to run by us, or you have an opportunity or a measure that we didn't think about when we were putting our community survey together, this is a great place to do that. So you can just kind of put in a paragraph about your idea, and then if you want, put your contact info in there, and we will reach out to you so that we can learn more. So those are my slides. I will turn it over to my partners.
Thank you, Tricia. Tim Conklin, I'm with the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission. Just curious, how many of you, just a stage 3 for you in this room, at the conference, heard the presentation on Tuesday? Okay, great. Well, just so you know, we're not going to repeat everything we did on Tuesday. We'll speed it up a little. But for those that are new, that were not here earlier this week, just wanted to share with everybody about the organizations that will be working on the priority action plan. And as Tricia stated, it's a sprint. It is very fast in order to get this plan in place. We have about 1 million people in Arkansas. We have 499 cities. I believe it used to be 500, 499 cities. We have the 3 largest MSAs here, serving these 3 groups right here, serving about 1.5 million. So about 50% of the state is within these 3 metropolitan areas. We're very excited that we had the opportunity to participate with Arkansas Energy and Environment. All 3 entities did submit a notice of intent we're interested in participating, and so pleased that you invited us to be part of the plan. So for many of us, we're working on multiple plans within our regions, trying to implement those plans. And I would say just this discussion this week, even this morning when we talked about managed lanes here in Little Rock and reducing congestion, complete streets, there are many things that we do in the transportation sector that reduce greenhouse gas emissions within our metro areas of the state. So appreciate that. I'm just going to go ahead and ask Bernadette a question representing Metro Plan. So tell us more about the survey that was developed and what you're looking for, not just within the region that you serve, but the entire state. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Well, we have developed a survey really collectively. Metro Plan populated and is hosting the survey, but really it was made with input from all of our organizations. And we started by researching energy and environment innovation measures that have been implemented or pursued or recommended by state, local, and national organizations. And we organized them into 5 categories. And so generally, Tricia's covered the categories, but it revolves around reliable, low, and zero emission energy, efficiency and waste minimization, which for our transportation purposes includes transportation efficiency measures like building a system to allow access to no or low emission modes of transportation and managing the system efficiently. Then thirdly, beneficial electrification, electrifying things that where it makes sense, where it benefits us. Sequestration, which means capturing pollutants out of the air before they can pollute the atmosphere. And workforce and technical assistance, which is a big part of this planning process, getting people to work those new jobs that will be needed in renewable energy and sustainability. As of this morning, we have 185 responses to the survey, but we want responses in the thousands. With 3 million people in Arkansas, we want much larger and wider, broader representation of all counties and cities. So we're asking for your help in getting the word out there about the survey. Tricia mentioned push cards. The QR code to the survey is also at the bottom of your agenda. So if you have not already, please take it. It only takes about 6 minutes. And put it on your Facebook, put it on everywhere. Send it out to if you're an elected official, send it out to your city councils or your quorum courts. Because we really do need representation from everywhere in Arkansas. This survey is really an essential part of gauging public support for different measures. It's not going to result in a prioritization of specific projects to be included in the plan, but generally it's going to give us a sense of which measures enjoy broad public support to help guide us towards certain measures that we should look into further. So it is really crucial to get broad participation because it's that intersection between broad public support and impact of a potential measure as far as reducing greenhouse gas emissions that is going to make a measure really competitive for funding and really realistic to implement in Arkansas. Because if something's really going to be really effective in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but nobody wants it, it's not going to work. So we're really looking for that perfect intersection of support and feasibility.
Thank you, Bernadette. Next question will go to Josh, representing the Fort Smith metro area. You're already sprinting towards the finish line to prepare the priority action plan. Talk about types of meetings, workshops that you're doing within your metro area and why it's important to get that input for the Fort Smith region as we try to roll these plans up in the metro areas to an overall statewide priority action plan.
Thank you. We've started even today. We have 6 public meetings that we are doing to bring in the public. Before that, we met with local groups, the local Citizens Climate Lobby, and also the university energy education programs for low income to get that going, to start not only helping us get the word out, the survey out, but also to start garnering some concepts and some ideas. And it's worked quite well so far. We're hoping that these meetings will bring in our citizens in our MSA. We're going to have 6 meetings all the way up into October. We're even going to have computers on site so they can take the survey and give us even in person concepts, ideas. And so having a very broad and diverse array from just public meetings with our citizens to get their feelings, and especially on the measures, kind of where it prioritizes in their area, but then also workshops like this with subject matter experts so they can give us actual projects, different ideas. So once we get the survey back, we can also see what ties all of the MSAs together. What is important, not just in Fort Smith and our region, but what is starting to really tie together and be a trend that we could all then really start to gather together and put those ideas together to kind of connect from Northwest Arkansas down to us, all the way across over to here in Little Rock.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. Next up, I'll have Elizabeth talk about Northwest Arkansas. We're in a full sprint, trying to get to the finish line. Tell us, what's the motivation for Northwest Arkansas to do this type of plan, and how does it relate to our work in the region?
Thank you, Tim. And this kind of correlates to all of us. The motivation is to make us, the region, our communities, the individuals that live in all of our communities, have a better place to live, help the environment, help us, be more competitive to be able to apply for these grants. Tricia, I want you to know that you popped my balloon, because I thought there would be millions or hundreds of applications, not 40 to 110 awards. So thank you. I thought we would all be getting lots of opportunities.
May I just say that EPA has popped your balloon, so here's the messenger. And another thing I wanted to add is, we've asked them to help with their areas again. It covers, half the population in the state. And that really allows us at Energy and Environment to focus on the rest of the state. This is not an effort that we could do alone. And so we're really, really grateful to have such wonderful partners so that we can focus on rural Arkansas and the areas that aren't covered by their MSA.
This also tells me that we're gonna have to really, all of us work together, not just local MPOs or, the state itself. I think we may even have to expand to other states to make us all more competitive here in Arkansas. But really, the purpose and why we were interested in doing this is to help all of our communities, but the opportunity to advance our programs, advance the plans that we have gone through the public process. The public has told us what we want to do, what they want, and this is an opportunity for us to be able to hopefully implement those ideas in those plans.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And yes, when I heard Tricia say that about the EPA, not Tricia herself, it did make me think that, yes, we're all going to need to work together to make sure we are competitive as we move forward. As mentioned, the larger MPOs, we already have plans that have been developed. Heard an excellent presentation today about Metro plans and the Greenway plan. So there are plans in place also that, can move forward potentially, as priority action items throughout the region. Tricia, so we heard from the three MSAs and what they're going to be doing. Can you tell us more about other activities in the state to get public involvement, public input on this important project?
Sure. So we are working to try to do a roadshow across the state. We are looking at over the next few months holding sector-based meetings to cover those other sectors that were on my giant chicken slide. And very similar to this workshop, to get some input from experts, we want the public to come to that. And we're also, since we're going to be touring around the state, going to tie in and have some community meetings afterwards to hear more broadly than just the specific sector topic we're focusing on earlier in the day about what are the needs of that community. And so we're looking at, in the October, November timeframe, having an electricity sector meeting in Pine Bluff. We're looking at having an agricultural focused meeting somewhere in the Delta. We haven't picked a venue yet. We're still early days logistics. And then we're talking about having an industry focused meeting up in Northeast Arkansas. And so we're hoping that by traveling around the state, by bringing in experts, by having some focused conversation like today's on a specific topic, and then having those broader community meetings, we're going to maximize our ability to hear from all our candidates about what we should be including in this plan.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing real quick, Tim? So when we say we're on a sprint, and she's mentioned March 1st, we have to have all of our stuff from all of you to them by December 1st. So we're talking even a much bigger sprint for us. So just to be sure that everyone understands that they need time to get the plan together. So for you and I to work together, we got to do it in 2 months.
No pressure.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're not gonna shoot that.
And I think that's important. So, and once again, I'm glad for the turnout. I know when you're at a conference from Tuesday to lunchtime today to stay for this, but it is really important to get that public input. This is probably for any of the MSAs. Once again, we're trying to get everybody to be thinking about what priority action plans items should be included in the plan. So just some examples that you may be thinking about in your community, your MSA. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but just once again, it's a fairly broad topic. I think almost every session of the Arkansas Transportation Planning Conference, I was thinking about potential type projects that could potentially go into a priority action plan. So Elizabeth, let me start.
Sure, I'll go first. So we have a bicycle and pedestrian master plan that we adopted in 2014, just similar to what you saw earlier with Metro plan. And that's one of the things that I would like to see happen is a lot more. We probably completed 100 miles of several 100-mile network. I would like to see that be a piece of what happens. We have a couple of cities that have been looking at an e-bike rebate program that I think would be very beneficial for the whole state to be looking at a situation like that. Solar for our residents, that aren't going to be able to, be able to do that themselves would be an idea that I think should be this statewide.
Josh.
Yeah, I mean, all those ideas, and I think just the more that we can be creative, and really fixed and tangible ideas, the more that our action plans will set us apart, when we submit them to the EPA. So yes, all the different things, but also a focus again on rural and low income, I think is really where we need to try to bolster our action plans with those type of projects.
I know the EPA is interested in how can we use these plans to then tap other sources of revenue as well. So I'm really interested in stacking resources because there are USDOT grants that can cover some of these things. There are Department of Energy grants that can cover some of these things and EPA, but how do we make a concerted effort to say, we want to get these specific things done and we're going to pull all the stuff. We're going to pull all the resources together to make this happen quicker and better. So, so you mentioned bike head, similar in Central Arkansas Regional Greenways. We'd love to see that built out quicker, but also how do we utilize that right of way perhaps for carbon sequestration and stormwater runoff mitigation? So thinking broadly, not just let's build a path, but how can we build it holistically to meet several of the objectives of the Energy and Environment Innovation Plan?
Thank you, Bernadette. And, once again, Tricia talks about workforce. I attended a conference a couple of years ago down in Austin and heard from the Austin Transit provider. And they were talking about their workforce by converting their fleets to EV and just mechanics and trying to make sure that the workforce, is there to be able to work on those fleets. So, think about, we heard from RDOT this week regarding to the NEVI, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Grant Program that will be launched here fairly soon. So I think there's, opportunities to think about existing programs that we have. The larger MPOs are receiving carbon reduction program funds. We did a call for projects. We have more interested cities, municipalities, asking for money for those type of projects. And so once again, it's very broad. Looking forward to today's workshop. I'm going to turn it over to Bernadette, or did we get through the run show here for the rest of the conference? So we'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Josh, Bernadette, Elizabeth, Tricia, appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim, for moderating. All right, so I wanted to take a few moments to let you know how the rest of this day is going to go. And I sure hope you'll stick around until 5. I know there are competing schedules after a long conference. Many of you are ready to get back to the office or more likely just go home. But I do encourage you to stick around. If you, for some reason, can't stay to the end, please do submit ideas via the idea box that is on those push cards and then complete the survey and spread the word about that. But as far as the rest of our agenda today, there will be 4 times throughout the meeting that you will be asked to actively give input. So after each of our 3 presentations and at the end of the meeting during our breakout session. After each of the 3 presentations, we're going to have 4 questions for you. Each question will be put up one at a time on the slide, and you'll be discussing it amongst yourselves for just a couple minutes. We only have 5 minutes per question. So a couple minutes, turn to your neighbor, discuss amongst yourselves, and then use 2 to 3 minutes to scan the Menti QR code and get on there and actually type up your thoughts on your smartphone and submit it to us. And that will give us a really nice list of feedback from all of you. So there's going to be a timer. It's going to be very quick. So we'll be kind of circulating and trying to keep everybody on track. But just keep in mind, 2 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, 2 to 3 minutes to respond on Menti. Marshall?
Environment innovation. So
water stuff, how much is on the environment in general versus energy plus profit as an air quality?
Very focused on greenhouse gas emission reduction. Side benefits don't want it. All right, and then we will go through each of those 4 questions after each of our wonderful presenters finish up. So you see that 45-minute time frame for each session. 20 minutes of that is going to be our subject matter experts presentations, then 20 to 25 minutes of active input and discussion from you all. Then at the very end of the meeting and starting at 3:45, we are going to have breakout sessions. And each of you should have received a green Post-it with a number on it. If you did not, please raise your hand. But what we're going to ask you to do, according to your number, we're going to ask you to go sit in one of the corners of the room with the number matching your Post-it. And that's going to be your group for the breakout session. Each of our presenters and us staff folks are going to be rotating around the room to visit with you all every 15 minutes. So that's going to be your time to ask questions of the presenters, discuss ideas for how do we overcome barriers, how do we incentivize some of these things, how do we work together, and really start coming up with creative ideas and documenting those ideas. So we're going to ask you, if you have a specific idea, to write that idea on a Post-it note and stick it up on the easel pad. Then the last 30 minutes of the meeting, one of us staff facilitator folks are going to report out just a summary of what we heard on that topic. Sound good? So we're going to keep you busy. Oh, and if you are on Zoom or live streaming, you will still have the same opportunity to submit your thoughts via Menti. And then I think at the end of the meeting, we'll close the live stream, but you will have that opportunity to submit your ideas via the idea box. And Tricia has another way to submit your ideas on Zoom.
So for those of you on the live stream, we're gonna show a link for how to log into the Zoom for that last piece if you want to actively participate during that piece. And we will be running basically a breakout room for everybody on Zoom. So we have our virtual 5th station, if you will.
Thanks, Tricia. Any questions about how we're going to keep you guys busy for several hours? All right. I'm going to turn it over to Tricia to introduce our first speaker.
So I'm very happy to introduce Jason Wiley from our Arkansas Department of Energy and Environment. If you don't know Jason already, he is a fabulous resource on alternative fuels and low and zero emission vehicles. He works with our Clean City Coalition, as well as working on strategic initiatives for the Arkansas Department of Energy and Environment's Energy Office.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason. I currently am the manager of strategic energy initiatives at the Arkansas Energy Office, and I am the Arkansas Clean Cities Coalition director. Over the last 3 years, I've been working on alternative fuel initiatives across the state, including several electric vehicle incentive programs that some of you may have participated. Let's see. Okay. Clean Cities is a network funded through the Department of Transportation, and it recently had its 30th anniversary. Clean Cities is a coordinated group of 75 active coalitions covering nearly every state. Arkansas Clean Cities was established in 1992, and we work with local government, private industry, and the general public on education and assistance in the use of alternative fuels and sustainable transportation practices. And Arkansas Clean Cities is housed inside the Arkansas Energy Office at E&E. Okay, so today we will look at ways emissions can be reduced in the transportation sector with a focus on alternative fuels and fueling infrastructure, and discuss the challenge of paying for all this transition moving forward. What are the benefits? Of course, mitigating global climate change, but also improving air quality improves community health outcomes. People see less respiratory illness, fewer sick days, and overall improved quality of life. And there can also be real economic benefits to these. Many alternative fuels will save owners money in fuel costs and maintenance over time and help reduce transportation burdens. Most alternative fuels are produced domestically, meaning less dependence on foreign oil markets and increased energy security in the transportation sector. And what are strategies to do this? There's no real perfect solution for every transportation use case. Different end users will have different needs. So it will take many strategies and technologies, and then we'll have to overlap to create unique solutions. First strategy is reduce fuel use. Obviously, if we use less fuel, we create fewer emissions. This may be possible by efforts to encourage taking public transit, carpooling, working from home, using micromobility, and addressing things like food deserts. So there's less distance to travel. And then we have lower emission traditional fuels. This alternative fuel technology includes replacements or supplements to traditional fossil fuels like biodiesel, ethanol, and renewable diesel. By blending with or replacing traditional fuels with these alternatives, it's possible to reduce overall life cycle emissions. B20 and E85 are two examples you may have seen at the gas station already. They can reduce emissions of carbon monoxide up to 15 to 20% on average. And while renewable diesel made from notes. I lost my notes. Renewable diesel is made from biomass stocks, has been shown to reduce carbon intensity by an average of 65%. These fuels work similarly to gasoline and diesel, and while they provide significant emissions reductions, they may not be readily available or convenient for some drivers to use consistently. And that brings us to the other alternative fuels. You may be less familiar with these, but they can help to make significant cuts to vehicle emissions when implemented. GHG reductions or nullification can be achieved through the use of alternative fuels that offset more emissions than are used to generate them. We're going to focus today on renewable natural gas, hydrogen fuel cells, and electrification. Renewable natural gas, or RNG, sometimes called biomethane, is a biogas that is upgraded and placed in the conventional natural gas system. It's produced from multiple sources, including livestock waste, landfills. Yeah.
Apologies, we've got the wrong slide up for the people on Facebook Live and Zoom. No, I broke it. It's me. Can I get a confirmation that we have the right thing on Facebook Live? Or YouTube Live, sorry. Thank you, and sorry very much, Jason, for interrupting your presentation. But now people can see your wonderful slide.
That's good. Be more helpful to them than probably me talking to them. Okay, renewable natural gas, we're back. It comes from livestock waste, landfills, water sludge, food waste, and other organic waste operations. RNG can be used for electricity generation, heating and cooking, bioplastics, and vehicle fuel. RNG vehicles operate much like conventional fossil fuel vehicles with a combustion engine. That doesn't make the next slide. There we go. By capturing methane emissions from decaying biomass, RNG can achieve up to 400% reductions in emissions versus traditional fuels through production and use. And RNG is becoming more available. It presents a good alternative, employing a tested technology with existing infrastructure system for transportation and refueling. However, RNG vehicles will still encounter the same maintenance issues as their traditional gas counterparts, and they still create some emissions. The fuel can be hard to source and doesn't need to be as refined to be burned in other use cases. Hydrogen fuel cells or FCEVs. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles use a chemical reaction to create electricity from hydrogen fuel and oxygen in the air. Do not ask me to explain it more than that. That powers electric motors in the vehicle. This process only produces electricity, water, and heat. So, creating no emissions and functioning similar to fossil fuel vehicles, fuel cell vehicles could be a good alternative for many. But the technology and the market are still relatively new compared to other alternatives. Access to infrastructure is limited to the West Coast, and it's difficult to create clean hydrogen to maintain overall emission gain. With billions of federal funding, though, looking to create hydrogen infrastructure, fuel cells are poised to become a more prominent fuel in the future. And that leaves us with battery electric vehicles or just EVs. You're probably familiar with EVs, which are dominating the news right now. And there's a lot of interest in transportation funding for this alternative. Electric vehicles will make impacts across the transportation sector as they're currently enjoy a lot of private industry and federal government support. EVs with the right infrastructure deployment not only reduce or eliminate emissions, but can reduce fuel and maintenance costs. EVs have fewer moving parts than their combustion engine counterparts that require less maintenance and repair. And another interesting development in EVs is vehicle to grid or vehicle to everything, in which the EV becomes basically a portable battery capable of sending power back to the grid, powering your house in a blackout or your tailgate in the parking lot. EVs do have their own challenges. Charging can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 10 hours, depending on the vehicle, the battery, the type of charger, which creates range anxiety among some consumers. Installing charging infrastructure can be expensive, and finding solutions for households who don't have dedicated parking will be key to adoption. Fast charging can also have extremely high peak energy rates, where utilities do not offer EV-specific tariffs. And EVs will not work for everyone today. Some drivers will need more range, some will need faster refueling, and at the moment, EVs are not extremely affordable for most Americans, even with federal rebates and other incentives. So, obstacles to deploying all fuel development. Deploying these technologies can be challenging, especially in historically underserved and rural communities where adoption may lag behind the market. Outreach is key, and education is important to dispel misinformation, build confidence in the local consumer, and in identifying partners in the community who are motivated to see projects succeed. Programs should include equity and address financial and other barriers to ownership beyond those addressed through federal tax credits or other incentive programs where funding gaps can occur. And it's important to remember that smaller municipalities will have less ability to shoulder long-term costs, like waiting on reimbursements from funding incentives. Planning ahead to address those logistical needs should also be a priority when building incentive programs with subgrants. Once deployed, some stations may need additional financial support during the initial operation phase while the market grows. And all these challenges require adequate funding to address them in some way. And in many communities will not be able to fund these types of projects on their own. So funding opportunities. Reducing emissions is the goal, but it's going to take funding to get there. Federal funding will be the catalyst spurring private investment in the short term as these new markets mature. These opportunities will be based on public and private partnerships that allow the market to develop with less uncertainty in the short term as consumers adopt new alternative fuels. Some example federal funding opportunities you may or may not be familiar with. These are just a few of the many that are out there from places like EPA, DOE, DOT. These examples focus on alternative fueling infrastructure for specific fuel types or use cases. NEVI, for example, is focused on major interstates to create a national system of EV chargers. CFI also focuses on EV charging, but it's more focused on large community implementations. The Clean Bus Program is focused on replacing diesel school buses with alternative fuel buses. And these opportunities may have rigid guidelines or cost share requirements that some entities can't meet or don't make sense in their communities. So the flexibility of the CPR grant program means it can not only fund new concepts, but it can help fill those gaps other funding opportunities create. Communities have the ability to right size a project that can be beneficial and affordable. And projects may wholly fund a concept like transitioning to an RNG municipal fleet by purchasing vehicles and infrastructure at the same time. And there's a great potential for municipalities to work with the private industry to leverage funding into more robust projects with wider scopes over larger areas. So some things to think about for planning and implementation. This is what is the exact emission strategy? What are your goals and how are you going to have meaningful metrics that you can measure them by? Who is going to be responsible long-term for the project and for the infrastructure to make sure that it's there for the community long after the project closes? What existing private stakeholder relationships can be leveraged to further support the project? A lot of cities or counties don't really want to end up owning fueling stations. They would rather that be in the private sector. So how to make those stakeholder relationships from the beginning, that'll be important in transitioning it to private industry. And then how will environmental justice be considered from planning through execution? What can community partners bring to the table to ensure this and ensure equitable access to the workforce training and other benefits associated with the project? Okay, so we made it through. Hopefully today's going to lead to some good resources for local and state government agencies that we can use over the next few months to answer some of these questions in our communities. Again, my name is Jason Willie, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. We're going to transition now to our first of the 4 questions. Trish is going to help me bring it all up here. So you guys can go ahead and scan that QR code. If you don't have access to or don't know how to use the QR code scanner, you can also go to your browser on your phone and go to menti.com. And there is a code that you will have to enter that will take you to our EEI interface here. So I might need some help working this Menti thing.
We're trying to make sure everything's set up.
Usually it's.
Getting it set up now, but I know the first question, so I'm gonna turn you loose for your little 2-minute discussion with your neighbor. The first question is, what are the major barriers to implementing zero and low emissions vehicles and vehicle charging infrastructure? What are some of the major barriers? So go ahead and start your discussion with your neighbor.
Away now. Sorry.
Got it. It's viewing your. Yeah. We have the login stuff. I can log into it for you really short. You're just liking it repeatedly.
Oh, okay.
Get a lot of responses.
Okay, sorry. That's
So it's online. Yeah, and acting there for too, but we were using all of it. Yeah, I need to smoke that. It's we're trying.
Wait, it's not acting like it.
Can we use, instead of using the plugin Minty app, can we just share screen from the Minty page?
That would be the ideal situation. Let me stop. Now, I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna hopefully it works. I'm working on
You can scan the QR code on the agenda where it says Mentimeter on the agenda. You can scan that QR code. Okay, we're trying to figure out how to launch the Menti, and then once it's launched, you'll be able to access it that way.
It wouldn't be allowed to see that on the.
Can I share the screen? Is that okay? Can you share? Screen? There we go. Yeah.
All right. I think we are up now, and the DEQ team is going to advance the slides. So the code up here is the code, if you're going to it through your browser, going to menti.com, the code is 7873 0117. I'll say that again, 7873 0117. Menti.com 7873 0117. And we're going to launch the first question in just a moment.
Allowing you to hear both.
We're getting lots of thumbs up, so thank you for the support.
Nah.
It won't allow me to present and do that, so is this okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
We got instructions.
Turn that on digital screen.
It's all business and politics. A commentary.
We can advance to the next slide.
Sorry, they don't care.
Get ahead of some, but I want to do.
Exactly. So here's our first question. So now you'll be able to enter your responses. What are some major barriers to adoption of low and zero emission vehicles? We'll take 2 more minutes till 1:35 to have some responses to this via the Menti. And the way this is set up, you can put whole sentences if you want to. So take your time.
These answers say.
Policies. Only because I think for it to get in front of.
Sorry.
But other than that, it's
I will make it edits.
I'm gonna leave it alone. Yeah.
Sensitive nature.
it's like a bunch of stuff we've already said a bunch of times.
Right. Okay.
And but please do send me a file just in case.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Excellent, thank you. Great work.
I'll check and see, I don't know if Tim. I'll talk to Tim, maybe he's some of this, so.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. Very good, thank you.
I think we talked a little bit. They talked to me.
It's also, I forgot. Also members on the bond next, I guess next Friday. 9 o'clock. News articles, we're talking about those, and we're gonna.
Excellent.
So.
Please
A
feel.
little bit.
That goes back in.
Is there any way we can get rid of that meter as close to that house to the top of the screen? Do you even see that?
I see it all, yeah, but.
And we have 42 seconds until voting closes, so get your final thoughts in.
Approval. Yeah. Very good.
All right, now that voting has closed for that question, we're going to move on to our second question, which is, how can we make low and zero emission vehicles more accessible to all Arkansans? So thinking about low income disadvantaged communities, thinking about equity, equal accessibility for everyone in Arkansas. Feel free to talk amongst yourself for a couple minutes and then enter your thoughts into Menti. Some great responses in. Michaela, is the timer going to start automatically whenever it's time? Or?
I was planning to start it at 1:41 if we're doing 5 minutes per
Perfect,
time.
thank you.
So.
First one.
Great responses here. Not that I've been able to discover. I'm sorry. But I invite everyone to come up and read, yeah, sorry. Or pull up YouTube Live on your phone. Oh, I'm afraid of breaking it.
Getting out here. Yeah. Yeah. Not on my watch, right? Right. Take yours.
We have 45 seconds until this question closes, so go ahead and get your final thoughts in.
I'm participating.
We're going to have to move on to our next question, which is all about what types of jobs and training programs are needed to enable widespread adoption of low and zero emission vehicles. Take a few moments and talk with your neighbor. And responses are open in Menti.
I was typing in and just didn't see it. Yeah. It does not. Okay, look at it.
I want to buy it.
Yeah. Just looking. Although they are working on multiple things. That was a whole piece. That doesn't sound better.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's not better than this. Yeah. That's awesome. You see the recycle.
You all have amazing spelling skills. I'm very impressed. My goodness, for Belgium.
Very near future. Yep. So. No. The reason they're having double their capacity is because to ensure longevity to meet renewables. Double capacity does not mean double cost. You know. Just to emphasize. Yeah.
Control technology. Build it that way.
Do you guys see the chat? No, you didn't see the chat. One of my staff members, I couldn't read it though.
She's supposed to be moderating things so chat doesn't appear unless she allows it to appear.
Oh, well, it's up there. So,
Erica.
We're trying to fix it.
no, no problem. Just having one of my staff members, but I couldn't see. So what if so.
Our 1 minute timer has begun. So the next question. I do like what you all were doing, showing the answers one at a time. I think that makes it easier for the folks in here to see the screen too. So a little easier to read.
It's one at a time.
Good job.
Slow down a tiny bit for us slow readers.
Good.
10 more seconds. We're going to move on to our final question for this segment. Do you know of any organizations interested in promoting or supporting the adoption of low and zero emission vehicles? So basically, who else should we be talking to? Who could potentially offer expertise, resources? Who's already running a program that could use some extra funding? Who's potentially got funding for such programs? So this is not a yes or no question, even though it sounds like one. Who do you know?
What? It does. With the specific non-stickle. Yeah, but I don't think we have any more. What else? I do,
Really great, insightful and diverse answers, giving us lots of good ideas for all the additional organizations to reach out to. All right, we have about 45 seconds left. Right. We have closed that question. That is all 4 questions. And so very similar questions are going to repeat for each session that we have, each of our 3 sessions. At this point, though, it's 1:52. We do have a break scheduled for 2 o'clock, but since we're about 10 minutes early, let's come back here at about 2:05 and we'll continue with our second session. So go ahead and take a break. If you need more food, we probably have extra lunches, so please feel free to help yourself. And there's also still beverage service across the hall.
A fun fact as I'm connecting our computer up to some electricity, a very large portion of Arkansas's electricity comes from low and zero emission. We have a very large nuclear plant and we have more and more renewables coming online every day. All right, so hopefully now that we've got the technical stuff aside, I'd like to invite to the podium Mr. Tom Sarney. We are so happy that he flew all the way from Georgia to come talk to us today. He is an expert in sustainable transportation planning. And we've asked him to come here and talk about some innovative opportunities that we can do to build our infrastructure in a way that supports reducing greenhouse gases and making our community safer and improving quality of life for our citizens. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarney.
It's As soon as that popped up, I realized that I'm wearing the same jacket, got the same glasses on, but I did change shirts, so. All right. Again, thanks for having me. I did just fly from Atlanta, where cars are king. And I'm hoping that, some of the stuff I'll be talking about is, as I was sitting in this morning and listening to the presentation before mine, there's some redundancy, but hopefully I'll be able to come up with some new ideas and get you all thinking as we move into our next Menti session. So before I get into ideas, I think it's important to step back and think, well, how did we get to where we are today when it comes to a transportation system? And it's really not all that complicated, at least my version of it is. There's probably people in here that are more nuanced than exactly how we got here. And it is a bit more complicated than I'll make it here, but there's some big overriding things that happened 60 years ago or so that changed a lot. So it actually started in the early 1900s, but the big change was in 1956 with the Federal Aid Highway Act. This pumped a lot of money into an interstate transportation system. And states and cities and counties just could not resist a 90% federal chunk of money coming into their communities. And so they gobbled it up. And in only 15 years, this is kind of mind-boggling to me, in only 15 years, 26,000 miles of roadway was built. That's astonishing when you think about it by today's standards. The funding for this also contributed funding towards the establishment of state systems, like the one you have here in Arkansas. So that the interstates were designed to connect big cities to big cities. The state highway systems were designed to connect the bigger communities inside the states to the big communities within inside the states. But what happened and where we are today is that many of these became today's main streets. And a lot of this had to do with the requirements that the designers of the roads, the engineers, the planners at the time, were provided guidelines. And some people interpreted those guidelines, and some people still to this day interpret those guidelines as hard facts. The Green Book, and things like that. Again, the interstates are designed to get the big cities together. State roads are supposed to, the arterials, the state roads are supposed to get the communities together, and all about high speed. It's all about getting people there quickly, getting there, let me check that, not people getting their vehicles there quickly. The problem is that those state roads were pretty desirable places to put up a business, just like a interstate interchange. That's where people, that's where you see the gas stations and stuff and the hotels and everything. Well, on a smaller scale, what do we do? So those state roads became very attractive places for businesses to develop. And like that picture just showed, that's kind of where we are today. And they are guidelines, but again, they've kind of led to many of the problems that we have. Now it's not changing. Who's supposed to have this plan? I'm warning you all right now, throw your hands up.
Just be very vigorous with pushing the next one.
You stay here while I mash it.
Well, I already put you on the next slide.
There we go. Excellent.
All right.
Excellent. But now I chop the top of it off. All the good stuff's at the top.
Apologies.
Oh, sorry.
I think it, changed the size of the screen earlier.
Oh. Can somebody unzoom the display?
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's it.
Okay.
Let's go with this.
I'm sorry.
All right, so the previous slide talked about this magical thing that was created in 1965, if I'm correct, the level of service. So as you started cramming all these cars onto these state roads and such, things got pretty crowded. So the designers and planners of the day realized they have to come up with a system to determine, well, how bad is bad, how good is good, and how do we project into the future plans to accommodate movement of vehicles. They came up with level of service. Well, this is an example that I found in our company's files, which I thought is pretty powerful. So this is in Richmond, Virginia, Broad Street. I don't know if anybody been to Broad Street. Okay, so there's a vibrant street, lots going on. I mean, literally thousands of pedestrians. You have streetcars, you've got buses, you've got private automobiles, all mixed into it. And once, this obviously was in the 20s and it predates the level of service, but when that level of service started functioning, it was considered an F. So hopefully you all can see the blue arrow there pointing at the Sears sign, because what I'm about to show you is where we stand 100 years later. This is Broad Street, Richmond, Virginia in 2023. Based on the design guidelines that were laid out to move those vehicles through. Those guidelines do a fantastic job of moving vehicles, but they require the expansion of this road into a 3-lane or 6-lane road. And from a streetscaping standpoint, it's not too bad. It's got the, median, it's got trees, it's got some shade trees and stuff like that. But what, stood out to me was there's no people. There's plenty of cars can go flying. I mean, why? There's no limits on speed on that one there. But there's no people. And there's also, when you look to on the left-hand side there, they took away a lot of businesses, turned it into a parking lot. So, it's an example of adherence to strictly to certain guidelines and such have led us to a place where we are dependent on, by design. And with that comes consequences. When you start putting down lots of pavement, somebody here help me out here. What is it? For every car on the road, there's 2 point something space. You need 2 point something parking spaces for one. So it's not just the car itself, but you've got all this unused parking spaces sitting out there. It's not just the roads. So with a lot of pavement come some consequences, and it's just something we have to recognize, and we've been talking about all day. They want us the heat islands, the urban effect of heat. And it's not just the roads, I recognize that the buildings themselves and such have an impact on this. But all that pavement does keeps the heat from the sun in those urban areas. If you watch the news and you watch the weather, it's almost always warmer in an urban area than it is out in the country. But in some cases, it can be 6 or 7 degrees difference, and that's a pretty big deal. And it's especially impactful to lower income neighborhoods that surround some of the inner cities today. I thought this was kind of ironic. it was from a news article. Let's see, it's in San Antonio. I thought it was kind of ironic that one of the reasons we have heat islands, which is the interstate above, is now being used to shelter the kids from the heat island effect by providing the shade for them. All, you know, we can joke about that, but unfortunately, not all, you know, underpasses are used for fun and games with kids. There is a reason that people in the homeless community are underpasses, is because it's protecting them from the heat and protecting them from the weather conditions that this world we've created are, you know, inflicting. If you put a lot of pavement down, it reduces where that water can go when it rains. Regardless of anyone's position on climate change and all that kind of stuff, it does rain, and it rains a lot, and we don't do a very good job of storing the water. The kids probably have fun playing in it, but that doesn't help. This is from somewhere here in Arkansas, not too long ago, from, you know, I guess March of 21. And then this one is, I want to say from earlier this year. I think I picked it up. Oh, I'm sorry, 2019. I skipped it. But again, you have problems, real problems here with flooding, because the water there's more water coming down than the current systems have for dealing with it. Dependency on the private automobile also generates an awful lot of emissions. And yes, EVs will play a big role in reducing some of that, but that's a bit of ways off. You know, just this year, you've had several instances where you've exceeded emission standards or emission goals and things. And let's not forget, it's not just us that are breathing down this air, but it's our children. I could go on and on about the impact that carpool lines have at schools. There's this fascinating thing I saw just recently where they did a study, and they, you know, some parents will get to the carpool line, I guess you call it the carpool line, right? They'll get there like 40 minutes early because they want to be in the front of the line so they can get, you know, little Johnny and little Susie first. But when they looked at it, it was actually, so they had to get there so early to be number one in line. They actually would have spent less time had they been the last one in line when the bell went off. And the worst part of all of that is you've got these kids, they're not just sitting there in the car with the windows open, they're sitting there with the car idling, producing fumes where all those little lungs are sucking it down. That's a whole nother issue about safe routes to school that I'd be happy to chat with folks about later. The focus on the automobile has also led to a dependence on gasoline. I mean, we're still a ways off from, you know, we talk about the things that are keeping people from being able to use electric vehicles and such. We're going to be gas powered for a long time. And it really has a negative impact, especially on those from a lower income household as gas prices go up. I mean, again, this one was from just earlier, well, last month. The gas prices here in Arkansas were again creeping up. And it does have a pretty significant impact to an awful lot of people. And it's not a really great place to be on a bike. And it's not a really great place to be a pedestrian. So what are some better options? And again, a lot of this has already been covered. I am not, we can go down some rabbit holes if you want to, but I'm keeping things at a pretty high level. Green infrastructure, simply put, it's finding ways to keep the water that falls, treat it and deal with it on the spot, as opposed to putting it into expensive systems that carry the water away, or possibly even worse, directly into creeks, streams, and rivers. And there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Again, there's probably people in this room that have much more expertise than I do. Pervious surfaces, you're seeing more and more of. Problem with those is they're tough to maintain and they're expensive to maintain. Stormwater infrastructure. This was mentioned earlier. Please, please, please take advantage of the right of way that you have. A project I was working on earlier this year, I was doing a project for the Tennessee DOT, and we were looking at what they wanted to understand the sphere of influence that the right of way could have on climate resiliency. That's a pretty big thing. And I didn't fully appreciate what I was getting into when I started agreeing to, yes, we'll look into the sphere of influence. I would be willing to, if cumulatively, the amount of right of way that those of you in this room have some influence over is massive. When you're looking at a statewide system of state roads, interstates, county roads, city roads. And a lot of that right of way is just used, is not used, it's just used for planting. A lot of it is used for plants that have to be maintained, which contribute to climate issues and such. If somebody really wants to crunch some numbers, please feel free to and get back with me on this. But in the early stages of talking in Tennessee, somebody did some back of the napkin stuff and said that if we just, in Tennessee, if they just stopped mowing the interstate right of, if they planted woody type plants, I don't know if there's any plant experts in here, but my understanding is woody plants absorb emissions better. So if you just got rid of the grass or just planted woody plants in the right of way, stopped mowing it, it would reduce more emissions or eat up more emissions than the entire transit system in the entire state per year. So not that people are going to do that, but it's something to think about. And then for the love of God, let's please get more trees on our streets here. Let's provide some shade, particularly in underprivileged neighborhoods. Just an example of what you can do with a single lane. In this case, it was redoing a complete street, but they took out a lane of traffic and put in a whole filtration system so that the water, it's kind of hard to see, I wish I had a pointer here, but by the minivan's passenger side rear tire, there's a drain that goes into those rocks, which then seeps out into the plantings. The surface of the bike lane too is also pervious to allow water to go straight on through. I also had the opportunity to work on a project for the Federal Highway Administration, looking into the resilient infrastructure elements of trails. And that was also kind of one of these big eye-opening moments for me where, you realize how much right-of-way there are, particularly with rail trails, particularly in areas of those that go through big urban areas. They're going through some, I don't know what the politically correct term to say is, but maybe some less desirable, historically less desirable areas, maybe more industrial and such, where in many cases stormwater filtration or stormwater storage wasn't ever factored in. So if you've got a rail trail going through there, you now have right of way that's available that you could use for those purposes at the same time you are providing a trail. And if you're going to build a trail, build it to withstand the worst weather you can fund, I suppose. And then you also might want to think about like the town of Paradise. Paradise is where they had the huge fires out in California. How many years ago was that? Not that long ago. The trails that are being rebuilt there are now being rebuilt. And I'm not sure what to think of this. They're being built to aid in emergency responses, meaning they're being built wide enough and strong enough that fire equipment can use them, or they can be used as an extra lane to evacuate, or they can be used as the firefighters go one way and the people are going out the other way. The trail is being used for something like that. So creative funding opportunities are out there. There's also things happening in the West where they're using a trail to put pipes underneath in order to pipe water out to very remote areas, because old rail lines go through some pretty remote places. They put the pipe in underneath, so if there's ever a forest fire or brush fire or whatever, they'll have water much more accessible than having to drop it in by airplanes and helicopters and stuff. So all types of creative ways to use trails, use the right of way. All right, complete streets. I've heard this a lot, so I think you all are pretty comfortable with what it is. It's just a street that's designed for everybody. Here's a grand example of it. I mean, this has got it all, right? It's got the rail line in there. There's buses, plenty of room for cars, bikes, peds, easy access to buildings, restaurants, and all that kind of good stuff. The key, though, is to think beyond just your typical pedestrian. Let's be thinking about the kids. Is there opportunities to enhance the way they get to and from school to go back, to overcome some of those issues we talked about earlier? People with disabilities, people using mobility devices. And it's also important, just like no two roads are designed exactly alike. The same thing would be, when you're thinking about a complete street, it has to be done to the environment in which you're going to. And there's all different ways of doing this. Certainly, I mean, that could be an entire conference, and probably our entire conference is just on these topics. But this is something that is, if I leave you with one thing, it's something to think about. So this is an example of a great complete street, right? Again, it's got all the same elements we talked about before, transit, dedicated, separated bike facilities, plenty of pedestrian. You've got tighter turning radii for safety. You've got a little pocket park there and everything. If you look really closely, I know that it's hard to do because it's not too big. I don't see anybody using any of it. I mean, if we want to get real here, how many millions of dollars were spent to put that out there and nobody's using it? So my personal motto is beyond the ribbon cutting. And that's something that Tool Design is taking on. You know, our firm has been involved in bike ped and transit access for many, many years. And I think we did a pretty darn good job at it, but that was one of our facilities there and people are not using it. So we as a firm and as a mission-based firm are committing ourselves to beyond the ribbon cutting. What are we going to do to get people to actually use these things? So you're all familiar with the term transportation demand management? Yes, no? See some nods, okay. Simply anything you can do to get people to not be dependent on the single occupant vehicle and to use other options. By the way, here's another little nugget. Please stop using the word alternative transportation. Use transportation options. As long as we continue to use the word alternative, we're on the fringe. If we're talking about a balanced transportation system, that's another way to say it, or transportation option, it mainstreams it a bit. At least in my mind, it does. This is a great, visual of what it means. And again, going back to how much space is required for a car versus a bus versus, in this case, bikes or people just walking. And it does, of course, this is an extreme situation, but even if a percentage of those people gave up driving alone and started using an option, even part of the time, it can make a significant difference. And we've just seen that. Who knows what I'm referring to? Probably the single biggest impact on commuting happened within the last 4 years, 3 years. COVID, working from home. Yeah. And working from home has also had other impacts to where this is again somewhat back of the napkin, a little more refined than that. We were crunching some numbers in the office that the latest numbers we were able to find said that between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., people who were identified as working from home are now taking 300% more trips that are less than 3 miles during that time. And it's like some of it could be that maybe they're willing to report it today. They're not sneaking out like they had to just a few years ago. Now it's just commonplace to do this. Qualitatively, we know that there's more interaction between parents and their schools, so that could be part of it. But disappointingly, when we continue to look at those numbers, there was over the same type of people who identified as working from home, over a 500% increase in the number of trips 10 miles or more. So we kind of scratched our heads like, well, why is that? And the only thing we could come up with, and again, I'd be interested in any thoughts you all have, is that a lot of the people who are working from home are in professional type positions, and maybe these people live farther away, or during COVID, or, as part of COVID, they moved to the suburbs. And maybe it's just that the nearest Walmart or Target is 10 miles away from where they live. I don't know. But they're going there between 11 and 1 p.m. on a very, very regular basis. Bottom line is what I'm getting to here is it's transformative, is that the opportunity in front of all of us to rethink how we provide transportation options to people is different today than it was just a very, very short time ago. And there's a little nugget. I took this actually from the plane as I was coming in this morning. This is another super challenge for all of us when it comes to transportation. These gigantic warehouses in the middle of nowhere. I don't know do y'all use the term collar community? It's a popular term in the Metro Atlanta area and some other metro areas I've talked to. It's not downtown. It's not really the suburbs. It's somewhere in between. Basically, if you can find an Amazon warehouse or a food processing facility or manufacturing plant, you're probably close to a collar community. And these are locations with horrible transit. And bike ped access is non-existent. And really the only way to get there is in a car. So maybe we need to think back to like where we were in the 1970s, where there was a huge federal push to promote carpooling again. We know a lot of people who work in these facilities, FAM pool, F-A-M pool, families pooling. And we do know, I actually had the opportunity, I guess they're a very, very, very big company that starts with the letter A and they deliver things to you. So I was working with that undisclosed firm. And they are finding that it's better to hire family members because they're more likely to share rides coming to and from work and more responsible. So maybe, maybe it's time to really rethink carpooling and get back into that specifically for these type of situations. The other big game changer are e-bikes. The prices on them are dropping considerably. There's so much talk about the Teslas and the cars of the world, but it's hard, again, very, very hard to see, but worldwide, 2- and 3-wheel vehicles, electric vehicles, are far more impactful on the reduction in oil use than cars are. They're becoming much more affordable. The batteries are faster charging. They last longer. And a big chunk of my career has been involved in the human behavior side of transportation and the decision-making process that people go through to decide how they get from point A to point B. So maybe I monitor these things more closely than a lot of people, but I've never met anyone ever that's gotten off of an e-bike for the first time and wasn't smiling. How many of you have ridden an e-bike? Is it? Oh yeah, it's fun. I mean, and even people who haven't been on a bike in a long, long time will come off smiling. And to me, that means a lot. There's something there to these things. When you pile that onto all these new people working from home, all these people working from home taking these shorter trips, who could be smiling, and are looking to have a more affordable way to do these type of trips, and maybe we're onto something here. If we can just provide the systems in place and the networks in place to allow people to do this in a perceived safe way. So I'll leave you with this. Just some thoughts, and I'm not doing this for the mentee. These are not the questions in there, but ask yourself, ask your colleagues in the office, what can we do? What are we going to do to better leverage the existing right of way for the betterment of the climate, and to prepare and to make our facilities more resilient, our communities better? What, if we're going to put in the green infrastructure, what are we doing to make a commitment towards maintenance of this stuff? I can't tell you, my wife, God bless her, she puts up with me. So I'm the guy who's like analyzing the pervious surface and how it's been clogged up or whatever, and that they're not maintaining it properly. And I can't go into a parking lot without looking for this kind of stuff. It's crumbling. Can we as a collective group begin thinking beyond the ribbon cutting? I mean, we don't build roads without thinking we're going to maintain them, but there's an awful lot of bike paths out there that were built with no money ever assigned to maintain them, or even transit facilities that were grossly neglected, in my opinion, from a maintenance standpoint. We can't let that happen if we want people to shift modes. What mode should get our priority? What's the proper balance there? Do any of us know? I suppose it changes. It's different depending on different communities. But we need to understand that. We need to get our elected officials on board. Here's a good one. And this is an elephant in the room. I've said this several times at conferences. Let's be real honest with ourselves about what is the future of transit. And whether or not people want to admit it publicly or not, there are an enormous number of transit agencies in this country that are in borderline death spiral. They don't have the funding to sustain themselves as they are. They can't get enough drivers. They can't get enough people to maintain the vehicles. And if we really cared about the short-term future of transit, and maybe even the medium and long-term future of transit, which I would be willing to think that all of us in this room feel that way. If we really cared, we'd close our laptops or whatever, get up, walk out of here, go get our commercial driver's licenses and start driving buses. Well, most people aren't willing to do that. And if you aren't willing to do it, if people who care so much, how can we expect that how we're going to resolve that? If it's that basic, if people won't drive the buses, they're in big, big trouble. I gave a presentation similar to this at a conference in Colorado not that long ago. And on the panel was a trucking executive. And trucking industry has a huge trouble getting drivers. That's a whole nother transportation issue. But as we started talking, the pecking order of people with that qualification, the CDL qualifications and such, they can make a whole lot more money with a whole lot less hassle driving trucks. And there's jobs, if they go to school to do this, they'll have multiple jobs coming out. It's a big issue and it needs to be addressed. And if it's if we're not gonna do that, if there's no answer to that, then we have to find another answer, because there's a lot of people who depend on transit. And then I'll leave you on a more positive note. I'm a big fan of these e-bikes. I come from a cycling background, so I suppose I'm somewhat biased, but again, I've seen so many people who are not avid cyclists using these things that they truly could be a game changer as far as some, especially short-term trips and school-related trips and things like that. So strongly encourage you to do what you can to make those as viable as possible for people. So that little thing in the bottom corner there, if you scan that, that gets you a little bit more information about me. That's the same one. I can answer any questions.
We're actually gonna need to move,
Oh, man, okay.
but he will be around for our workouts, or our breakouts, sorry, not workouts. Questions, he'll be available.
Thank you so much, Tom. Now, I think we're experts on Minty, don't you? Thought. Already up, good job, guys. All right, so we're gonna do our same 4-question routine. And the first question is, what are the major barriers to adoption of sustainable transportation infrastructure, like the kind that you just heard Tom speak about? Thinking about complete streets, green streets, carbon sequestration and right of ways. So talk amongst yourselves. Don't be shy. Turn to your neighbor, discuss. Having trouble re-accessing the Menti, raise your hand. Help you. Not letting you submit right now.
Take a look at that.
Michaela,
What?
can you open voting?
It's open. It should be open at
Oh,
all.
I see some responses that
there
are
it
coming
goes.
through. Try
It's open, yeah.
maybe refreshing your browser. Is it working now? Okay, perfect.
So next time I go up there to set up the next speaker, if you guys are not seeing the correct thing on your screen, wave at me.
Yeah, I didn't.
I'm the one who messed up and how I configured the screens, but just wave, and if you're not seeing the right thing, let me know. Okay.
to the second question, which is going to ask you about equity. How can we make sustainable transportation infrastructure more accessible to all of our Kansas? Are you having any trouble?
Did some good drawings over there.
I know,
Okay.
just wondering who that was.
Not a, here when we got
It
here.
may have closed before you submitted. Does someone have access to our paper forms? Does someone have the folder of that?
I will find it.
We're gonna get you a form where you can handwrite your answer. We do prefer the Menti if you can, but if you need a form to handwrite it, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it just flipped too quickly. I understand. But we do want to make sure to record your response.
So this is my little contribution.
That's your
Yeah.
contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Mallett? Yeah.
They'll never.
No, I doubt it.
submissions. That's great. We're going to move on to our next question, which is how does the workforce support the widespread adoption of sustainable transportation infrastructure? What types of jobs and training programs are needed to make this adoption feasible in our communities? Thanks, everyone. So our last question in this round is, which organizations, businesses, entities do you know of that are interested in promoting or supporting the adoption of sustainable transportation infrastructure? Who needs a seat at the table? Who needs to be involved? Who can help provide resources and expertise? Well, duh, MetroPlan. Right, wow. Good job, everybody. I'm very impressed. Trisha's gonna come up here and introduce our final speaker of today.
Oh, Lordy, for all of the different things.
So I get this put together, just give me a minute and hopefully my team will tell me that I'm sharing the correct screen this time. Apologies to those of you online who missed a few slides. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Andy Brewer. He is using PDF and not PowerPoint, so I would request his help.
Okay.
I make it. If I have it, I think all you want me to do is scroll down. You probably are more familiar with how to operate this than I am. I apologize. I'm a scientist. So very happy to introduce Mr. Andrew Brewer. He's the technical lead for transportation with Olson. And he's going to talk to us today about transportation mobility. So in other words, how to keep options open and how to keep traffic moving.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you, everyone. I have maybe the advantage or disadvantage of being the last speaker late on the afternoon, the last day of the session for those that attended the conference earlier. So I appreciate your time and attention. When talking with Tricia about my portion of the of this agenda and this session, really try to focus on talking about transportation mobility, but then also about maybe kind of focusing on maybe traffic and technology, transportation systems management and operations solutions. And if nothing else, hopefully will help us kind of think about the problem that we're trying to address and how we can think of tangible, actionable solutions that will help tackle the problem. Oh, this will be neat. Okay. Okay, please bear with me. I'm going to try to zoom out. All right. So we saw some really neat, what was that? The chicken slide, I think, from Tricia earlier. That was statistics specific to Arkansas, but I really wanted to give a kind of a big picture look about why we're here and why we're talking about this. Nationwide, the transportation sector in recent years makes up most of the CO2 emissions in the US. If we look at, when we're talking about transportation, the transportation sector, we're really talking about automobiles. Just within automobiles, light duty vehicles, you see personal vehicles. Personal vehicles makes up almost 60% of the CO2 emissions just within the transportation sector. So if I scroll back up here, that 60%, I mean, that is just about as much as the industrial sector in the United States. There we go. Looking at this, breaking this down further in terms of per passenger miles traveled, again, personal vehicles is the least efficient mode of transportation when it comes to emissions. Rail, as you might imagine, is the most efficient. And then what you don't see on there is active modes of transportation, bicycling, walking, for instance. Freight, not to overlook freight, but as you might imagine, air travel, the biggest emitter of CO2 per ton mile, followed by trucks, and again, rail being the most efficient here. So I really appreciate the remarks, presentation from Tom and Jason and others earlier today. Obviously, electrification, electric vehicles are an important part of this discussion. This is the most recent statistics that I could find in 2023. So about 8% of all light duty vehicles, again, this is just specific to the United States, a little over 8% are electric plug-in electric vehicles. That's the P, plug-in electric vehicles. But even though that is quickly increasing, it is still makes up about only 1% of all the total fleet of light duty vehicles in the United States. And if we look at just specific to Arkansas, it's even less. This is 2022 data, but it's about 0.2%. So what I thought about doing in framing the discussion here about how we can reduce, again, just focus really on about personal vehicle emissions and how we can tackle this. The way I think of it is in two broad categories. One is about trying to make the existing roadway systems more efficient. And then the other is about really the mobility piece and incentivizing more desirable transportation options and choices. And really that gets to reducing the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So looking at just the first piece and how we reduce congestion, it can be thought about in two broad categories as well. It's really the recurring congestion and then the non-recurring congestion. One way of thinking of that is recurring congestion, like your weekday rush hour traffic, going to work, picking up your kids from school, that type of thing. And then the non-recurring piece, either planned events, unexpected events, traffic accidents on the roadway. Those all are contributors to inefficient roadway systems and congestion and CO2 emissions. So I think I won't linger too much on this because this is, I think, things that we understand. There's maybe could be considered the traditional approach to addressing reoccurring congestion. And that's just building more highways, more roadways, more lanes, wider highways, very capital intensive, as you know, very energy intensive as well to do those. I imagine that's not necessarily the focus or the intent of the CPRG program, but there's also a downside of doing that. It could increase VMT, you increase speeds, less efficient, at going at maybe 70 miles per hour than versus a lower speed. And there's also thinking about bottlenecks and recurring congestions, more spot improvements, roundabouts. An example, how we can keep traffic flowing as much as possible and a little more cost-effective way of reducing emissions. I want to focus more on the technology side. I call this flex lanes, but we heard earlier today, those that were in the session this morning about the Interstate 430 bridge project here in Little Rock, referred to as the managed lanes, or I think it was part-time shoulder use. There's different terminology, but really what it comes down to is trying to make the leveraging technology and systems in order to make the most efficient use of the existing space. And there's been documentation about how the benefits of that approach and how much emissions that can be reduced. This is an example of, and this is Taylorsville, which is near Salt Lake City, but there's examples, I think, in the presentation earlier this morning, they showed other states that have different types of managed lanes in their areas. Lane management, advanced traffic management, TSMO, also just a different terminology, kind of referring to broadly the same things. Real-time motorist notifications. These are just examples here of using technology, leveraging technology to, maybe it's not going to, think of the traditional engineering way of measuring things, level of service. Not going to give you the level service A or sort of the free flow, but being able to more efficiently address traffic flow. You can use technology like this, or like smooth out traffic flow. So in the case of, and you see in that bottom picture of variable speed limits, in that case, that's an example out of Seattle, Washington. You're increasing, or you're decreasing the risk of maybe accidents, you're increasing the just the flow or smoothing the flow of traffic, right? So as we understand, if you get into a say a stop and go situation, every time you brake, that's energy being used. Unless you have a hybrid or battery electric, that's usually energy lost in the form of heat. And then you have to accelerate, that requires energy. So if you can try to smooth out that traffic flow, that can reduce emissions. To me, this is a no-brainer, and I'm especially here in Arkansas. I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially a lot of small communities that may not have the resources, the staffing, the expertise, but just having better traffic signals, equipment, better maintained devices. If you've ever been on a highway or roadway and one car pulls up on the side street and then you get the red light with all the other 100 vehicles to serve this one vehicle, or even worse, when there's no other vehicles and you get the red light anyway. This really is a very cost-effective way if we really are serious about reducing CO2 emissions. This is just a very straightforward way of addressing that. And I think there are some, considering more advanced ways of doing this, and just thinking about, I heard some remarks earlier about workforce development and just the challenges that we face in the labor market currently, about just trying to find, especially when it comes to technicians. But this is a neat model. This is in Kansas City area. There are other areas that have similar models. This is called Operation Greenlight. This is managed and operated through the MPO, which is MARC, Mid-America Regional Council. And what they do is that the communities, especially the smaller communities that, again, they may not have the resources, the budget, the technicians, they band together with the MPO and to maintain and operate their traffic signal system. So they have the scale is cost effective. It's a lower cost for the communities and results in a lot of benefits. So as far as the non-recurring congestion side, I wasn't intending to linger too much on this. I think, especially when it comes to non-recurring congestion, I'm sorry, when I scroll through this, trying to get to the bulk of the slide without being cut off. But really focused on the major highways and interstates in our area. And so really it's RDOT, thank you. And maybe larger agencies deal with this. And Now, I've had the privilege when I used to work with RDOT and helping advance some of these areas such as traffic incident management. The one thing that RDOT is not doing right now, and maybe could be beneficial at some point. There's been discussions about having like a safety service patrol, motorist assistance patrol program. There's countless examples throughout the US, like Florida Road Rangers here and Chart as mentioned. But those are ways that, again, cost-effective ways to better use the existing system more efficiently. In this case, when it comes to patrol systems, is disabled vehicles, debris on the roadway, getting that out as safely and quickly as possible to get traffic flowing. And then other management and operation strategies. Again, I won't linger too much. Inclement weather, we heard some of those neat, or saw some of those neat presentations earlier in the conference. And again, work zones, special events, they're all ways to help manage and reduce CO2 emissions. And then finally, before I move on to mobility, I just want to mention about, I consider maybe the non-so-sexy side of things. I saw remarks from Tom about, I like how he put that, the beyond the ribbon cutting. It's the stuff that really makes a difference, that really makes it happen. We're talking about really being serious about reducing CO2 emissions. It's really about the maintenance side, the management, the operations, all the stuff that you really don't see. That's the stuff that's really important in order to make, especially in technology, to make that function. Okay, so I'm going to transition to the time, hopefully be able to hit on this, the mobility, transportation choice, I'm calling it VMT. How do we handle reduce vehicle miles traveled? This comes from Federal Highway Administration's regular report on VMT. And if you can see this chart, as you might imagine there on the right, that big dip was due to COVID. And then looks like it's heading back up again. Really be interested to see what that trend looks like. If this is maybe reset the baseline to a certain degree, maybe more willingness for employers to allow employees to have flex time, remote working, and that sort of thing. But really could spend a whole lot of time on this, but just really want to touch on maybe just some examples to get us thinking. Again, the technology, like real-time notifications for drivers, again, can be for parking decks. If you've got a level that's full, there's no point in me driving around in the big circle and just move on. And not to overlook the freight side, but truck parking as well. And again, the real-time notifications, and that can be done through different ways. Public-private partnerships. This is one example, and actually kind of in our backyard in Arkansas. Smileys, that's not a typo, it's actually called Smileys, and this is a partnership with Frontier, the city of Fort Smith, through research through the University of Arkansas, and doing a bike sharing program essentially. And really this is intended to be targeted for the part of the community that they may not have the luxury that we do. They may not have a personal vehicle. They may not have a license. They may not even have a credit card. So how to give them more choices. One thing, the neat things about this, and the gentleman from Fort Smith probably knows a lot more about this than I can speak to, and just from knowing Dr. Mitra and his involvement with this. But for instance, those that may not have a smartphone or a credit card or a bank account, having like preloaded RFID cards that can be used to check out these bikes. Obviously, another challenge is just having that safe and inviting infrastructure in place. But again, this is a subsidized program. And so, yeah, a lot of good, neat statistics out there. And there's a lot of other examples of the public-private partnerships, the transit agencies, ORT, Rock Region, a lot of others that, to, again, help make this as easy as possible for the users to make choices. And I think this might be my last slide here. Again, there's gonna be a whole lot of other examples about how to incentivize the desirable behaviors that we're looking for here. Just having the fundamental infrastructure in place, the foundation in place, just having the sidewalks, bus shelters, lighting. All those are important pieces. I heard, I think yesterday, the day before this conference, said, what about high-speed rail and all these other great ideas? But you got to have the foundations in place as well. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
So much, Andy, and thank you for your comments about these solutions not having to be sexy, because I know that a big relief to us planners. So we are now going to get into some questions about sustainable mobility. And look how seamless our Menti has been. So we've already launched our first question. What are some major barriers to adoption of sustainable mobility? And I really want to know, are you guys going to slack off, or are you going to really bring it home with your responses? Are we going to get past 69? Well, some kind of voice.
quickly, you know.
All right, we're on to question 2. How can we make sustainable mobility more accessible to all
I'm not
Arkansans?
getting that.
everybody. Okay, on to question number 3. What types of jobs and training programs are needed to enable widespread adoption of sustainable mobility? Jobs and training programs, preparing the workforce. Everyone breathe a sigh of relief.
Go away.
Which organizations do you know of that are interested in promoting or supporting the adoption of sustainable mobility? Wow. Exceeded my expectations. All right, so now you all get to stretch your legs. Don't forget about your little green Post-it. What's your number say? Does it say 1? Go over there. By Lynn, wave Lynn. Does it say 2? Go over there. By nobody. 3, go over there by the entire Department of E&E.
Hey, Josh.
4, go there in the back corner. And we will join you shortly.
I've got to share a.
15
whiteboard
minutes
if I
per
can.
group, per presenter. You will not move, they will move for you. And we will discuss all the things. You can ask all the questions and share all your ideas.
So this gets done, that way people get into that webinar if they need to, and then we can move. Video.